when you open the door for somebody else.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the vaccine conversation. Melissa's already laughing at me. Why? I said something different this time.
I know. I just think it's so funny when we do these intros.
Well, yeah, tell us about your day. You started to tell us about your day, and I was fascinated. I'm like, wait, let me start the podcast so you can tell us about your day.
I want to say welcome to.
Yeah, okay.
Welcome, everyone. Why does it feel like it's been so long?
Well, because it has. It's been a couple of weeks.
It has. And honestly, I don't know. A couple weeks doesn't seem like that long of a time, but a couple weeks in this particular last couple weeks seems like an eternity because there's been so much going on. But no, all I was saying is it's been busy today. I had to go drop off my daughter at her school, which is a hybrid program, and then go grocery shopping with my younger son. Went to Trader Joe's, went to a vegetable and fruit store because we were going to make veggie juice. And so it was nice because like 90% of our stuff was produce.
Yeah,
which is cool. It's the way it's
awesome.
supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
Went home, made a veggie juice, visited with a friend who was a neighbor who got to come over and have veggie juice with us, packed a quick lunch to pick up my daughter again, and then feed her lunch in the car to come back and hurry up and put them down for nap so I could come here. And it was just go. And both of them needed some extra time to be able to fall asleep today. And we were just behind schedule and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, and I get your text, like you're already like 10 minutes late, and I get your text and you're like, I'm going to be there in 20 minutes because, Justice would not go to sleep. And, I'm like, I could be annoyed. I could be frustrated. I'm like, oh, that's so cute. You still have
how could you be annoyed?
You still have a baby to put to sleep.
I have a 2-year-old.
I want one of those.
He goes to sleep usually really well. This last week, he's going through some kind of developmental something, and he's taking a little longer to go to sleep. So I had somebody else there. He's not used to that. So that's the only reason why I want to make sure he's settled before I leave.
Okay. Yeah. No, I know how that is because then you can be settled.
Oh yeah.
And focus. Otherwise, you're. I keep glancing at the board because I feel like my level is higher than your level, but you know what? That's okay.
I don't even know how you could know that. From
it's like technology stuff. It's like a computer. It's a computer.
Is that what that fancy fandangle thing is? That electrical box with the stuff on it?
We could just sit here and talk about, our week all day long.
But oh my
Isn't
God.
It fascinating?
This last 2 weeks feels like it has been craziness.
It has been crazy. And everyone out there knows what we're talking about. It's the legislation that's hitting state by state, and we'll talk about that. But
it's the legislation, but it's this buildup of hysteria that has leading to the foundation for the legislation.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like we're reliving 2015, which was the beginning of the year where there was the Disneyland outbreak, and then all of a sudden, and by the way, we have these bills we want to introduce that are going to further mandate by taking away exemptions. And right now, as it stands, only 3 states.
Right. Well, we'll hold that thought because that's like 2 episodes from now.
That's true, but somebody's listening now.
I know.
So I'm just saying there are only 3 states that have taken away all exemptions except for medical exemptions. And this season, legislative season, a lot more are attempting to do that. And so I find it so funny because, the Disneyland outbreak had 131 cases, and they used all of that to really make people feel more comfortable with the fact that rights are being taken away and people don't get to go to school, even private schools. And then here we have like 40 cases. And which is so much less. And the only reason people care is because the media is making it so that you have to buy into the hysteria. Because last year, guess what? We didn't hear about measles. And the year before that, we didn't hear about it. And the year before that.
And we had more cases last year. There were like over 60 cases in New York last year. And no one was talking about it.
But there were over 300 for the whole year.
Right, for the whole year, right. And no one was talking about it.
You didn't hear about it.
Yeah, I almost feel like the media and all the legislators get ready, and then they pick an outbreak to then use as their
or quote unquote
point.
Outbreak.
Right.
So what's funny about this outbreak is on the CDC website, it's not listed as an outbreak according to the CDC because there are so few cases. So the reason we've been terming this outbreak is because of the media, and the reason they've been terming it an outbreak is because that really supports the population view of, oh my God, something's wrong. We quickly have to fix this. Okay, let's do some stricter laws. It doesn't matter that there is vaccine injury. It doesn't matter that there's such a small percentage of people that are opting out. All this stuff doesn't matter. We're scared. We're scared.
Right.
This is the fear thing.
But
again.
it's funny though. So we're excited to have Dawn from the NVIC on the show later today. We're going to record that. So we're going to pick up with all this and then give everyone a legislative update. But
she will help.
Yeah, but I find it interesting. We're doing a couple other topics first, but you're right. This idea has been foremost in our mind over these couple weeks. I almost wish you could talk to Dawn now, but she's we're gonna get her on. I guess today we're gonna talk about something that I think a lot of people don't even know has happened yet.
Yes, because we have not posted or shared.
Right, no one's talking about it. Although it's Melissa and I got to be on YouTube. We call it a television show, but it's not a television show. It's a YouTube episode of The Middle Ground, with done by Jubilee Media. So if you go to the Jubilee Media YouTube channel, you'll see they have several different shows.
Or you can even search Middle Ground.
Right, yeah, Middle Ground, and it's basically the Middle Ground takes two opposing sides of a very common topical social issue. Controversial. And they take three people from both sides, they put them together in a room, and they have us talk. And it was very interesting to do. And
I think we should start out first by saying there's an interview process before you do this. And I don't know about you, but I was specifically told that this was not to be a data-driven conversation.
Right.
This is not going to be about facts and researching and comparing actual data. This was supposed to be a more personal conversation between people because that is the type of platform that they have. The second important thing I think we have to say right off the bat was I don't consider myself anti-vaccine. I know you don't consider yourself anti-vaccine, but because of the premise of the show, in order for us to even speak, they sort of put us into the category of anti-vaccine. And what I've noticed from all of the really pleasant comments on the video from a very vocal minority, the comments are really attacking the idea that there are people telling everybody else not to vaccinate. And that's what they assume comes under that label of anti-vaxxer, is they assume that means that we are trying to eliminate all vaccines and tell everybody else, you shouldn't do it either, you shouldn't do it either, you shouldn't do it either. And I just don't identify that way. I don't think you do either.
Right.
And so I just want to put that out there right before we even talk about the episode, because two things: we were not really allowed to talk about data. And the second thing is we were labeled anti-vaxxers just by the premise of the show. Even though we said in our emails and in our interviews, we are pro-informed consent. We are about choice. We want increased vaccine safety and just awareness that mandates shouldn't be happening because there are a portion of the population that will be harmed. So I just want to put that out there because that really frames a lot of what you'll see. And also, we shot 2.5 hours of footage.
I know. And they whittled it down to 14 minutes and 21 seconds.
It's 14 minutes. So, it's really funny because you'll get criticism on both sides. I've seen criticism on our side that says you didn't get into the good arguments. You didn't even talk about herd immunity.
Right. And what I want to say is I guess, first of all, everyone, I guess if you want to pause the podcast and go watch the episode, it's only 14 minutes. And so you might find it interesting to watch that 14 minutes and then leave a comment. Leave a comment so you can kind of help balance out all the other comments. There's almost 1 million views of this episode so far in just 4 days.
And weren't you surprised though, with all these terrible comments? Look how many likes there are. Over 30,000 likes.
Yeah, almost everyone liked the episode, and
very small amount, 1,000 dislikes, and those are the people that are commenting.
The whole premise of the Middle Ground TV show. I'm dating myself again. Webisode is to get two opposing groups together and have a calm, informative conversation where you not only say what you want to say, but you also listen to the other people and you see if there's common ground.
And we weren't allowed to rebuttal.
Right. You're right.
People got to say, everybody said their piece. And then after that, it was like, that's the end of that prompt. And we go to the next
or
one.
we could comment, continue the conversation. But my point was going to be, when you look at everyone who's commenting on the episode, every single comment, almost without exception, that listener is completely ignoring the whole mission of the middle ground. The whole mission isn't to bash one side. It's to listen to both sides and then take something away from that. And none of the people that have commented on it have done that. Although
there are some.
Although probably because I didn't read them all. I didn't have time to read them all. But then that Dr. Mike, guy that did the video on the show.
Let's talk about that after. Because
talk about that. Okay.
Yeah, because I do want to talk about that too.
But Melissa, I'm curious. How did we get into this show anyway? They contacted you.
Immunity Education Group.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, they emailed us through Immunity Education, and I said, hey, yeah, that sounds cool, and I.
Well, and let me say something because, and I don't want to make anybody mad by saying this, but when this was originally set up, they talked to me about doing it, and they weren't mentioning you, and it was the weirdest thing. Like one night, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I was like, I have a feeling this is going to be doctors on the pro side against moms or parents on the quote anti side. And I was like, oh God, I hope they're not going to go this route, because whenever you do that, this is what happens on every media interview. I've been on, maybe a handful of interviews where they wanted to hear about my own story with my daughter. And it's always me on this side against a doctor. It's always doctor versus parent. And so when I had this, I woke up and I thought about this, I said, I'm not sure. I was hesitant to be a part of it, honestly, because I really wasn't sure what kind of angle.
Right. And I was nervous too, because I don't like to do things where they can edit.
But before you were even
content.
Part of the equation, I emailed the producers and I said to them, I hope this is not going to be a doctor versus parent thing. Are you having doctors on both sides, or is this going to be parents versus parents? They wouldn't pass the information along to me, but shortly after that, then you got asked to do it as well.
Right.
And that's when I knew this was probably set up to be doctors on the pro side and parents on the anti side.
Right, yeah, because I guess we can probably talk about this. They filmed an episode of this on vaccines prior to our episode, where they didn't have any doctors. It was just 3 pro-vaccine people and 3 anti-vaccine people, and they had to scrap all the footage. They couldn't use it because the anti-vaccine people basically shot down in a friendly way or not friendly way, shot down every argument that the pro-vaccine side could make, because the pro-vaccine side was completely unprepared. They had no good arguments or data or personal experiences or anything to share.
2 were not even mothers. They weren't even parents.
Okay, 2 weren't even parents. Yeah, you're right. So they shot this episode and it was completely unusable. So they had to start over and decided to bring some doctors in and maybe bring some parents that were maybe, I don't know, maybe more reasonable in the way they discuss this. And so what you're seeing is actually a second attempt to find a middle ground between
but I have
to
say
sides.
I'm not entirely pleased, because I still really see the doctor-parent dynamic is what they edited. So it was very focused on 2 doctors. So again, we showed up there and there were 2 doctors. I'm like, oh my God, see, I knew it. I feel like they should have had 2 doctors on one side and 2 doctors on our side, or 1 and 1. It should have been even, because if you read through the comments, a lot of the negative comments are saying, oh my God, these moms are trying to tell doctors about facts. Like they automatically assume the doctor's point has validity, even if that doctor really has not gone into vaccine research or vaccine education and the parent has. Just because of the title, that is enough to really give weight. And that's the thing I feared right from the beginning. And that's why I emailed them is, this is going to create a bias in the viewers. They're going to be inherently biased without even realizing it. This is going to be subconscious. They're going to hear the doctor talk and go, well, he's a doctor. I mean, I see so many comments. He's put 12 years into this. I'm like, but not 12 years into vaccine research and vaccine education.
Right.
Just because somebody has studied a long time in one particular area does not make them an expert on all the other subtopics. And when you are a parent who has had to research because something has happened to your child, you in essence have done so much more.
Yes, and you will know more now than the doctor. I honestly
on this
believe
topic.
that.
On this particular topic. Yes, I don't know about surgery and I don't know about a lot, and I don't claim to.
Right.
But I have definitely done the research on this. And then the other comment I saw a lot was, oh, these parents can't even give any data. Yeah, we weren't allowed to.
Because they didn't want to.
Yeah, we weren't allowed to.
Exactly. And it was, I feel like the footage was very unbalanced in that I feel like they barely showed me. I think they showed me saying 3 or 4 things. A couple of them kind of like nice, sort of neutral, semi-vaccine
and almost
friendly,
pro, yeah,
right,
like almost supportive.
And I mean, for me, I think one of the very salient points that I made, because they wanted us to talk about personal stories, not just about data, is I pointed out the fact that Marissa, the other anti-vaccine person, shared about her vaccine injury, how she developed very severe chronic rheumatoid arthritis after vaccines. I really kind of went into that, how we know that is an absolute, proven side effect of vaccines. And we warn it can happen. Arthritis reactions happen in 1 in 4 women already, but some of those will turn chronic. We know that happens. Here's a person right in front of you that happens to, and you guys are barely listening to it, barely acknowledging it. Well, I mean, that was kind of one point I felt that could have come across, because it's very interesting that the other doctor's child on the episode had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. His child suffered from it. We don't know if it came on after vaccines, and we weren't going to ask that. But one thing I found fascinating is when every time you watch the episode on the YouTube channel, there's a different advertisement at the beginning of the show. It's a whole variety of different ads. When I watched it, there was an ad for a medication that treats rheumatoid arthritis. That was, I watched the ad for 10 seconds. And it talks about, here's this rheumatoid arthritis drug. And then we go into a vaccine episode in which they talk about how a doctor's child has rheumatoid arthritis and a woman suffered RA from a vaccine reaction. I just found that, completely interesting and ironic. It wasn't planned that way because these ads are random.
Right.
But that was kind of one point I wanted to make. But I think the other point is, as you watch this episode, and you're sort of like screaming at your computer, well, why didn't you say this? Why didn't you, this is the perfect time to give a rebuttal with this idea. Right. Why didn't you talk about herd immunity? And why didn't you talk about everything? We did.
Yeah, we
talked
did.
about
You're right. We did
absolutely
talk about
every single possible,
for the most part, as much as we could get in.
Right. Yeah. Conversational argument where we were being respectful and being calm. We pretty much talked about everything, and they really put it together in a way that was pro-vaccine and allowed us to kind of share some of our ideas or some of our counter arguments in a very, very friendly, mild way. But we had some very important arguments that I thought were put forward that were not part of the show. Included. Right. So if you wanted it to be there, trust me, it was. Yeah. They turned 2 hours into 14 minutes.
And it was, again, not our choice how it was edited, of course.
Right.
And then I did see a lot of comments, speaking of Marissa's story, about these are anecdotes, right? You hear that all the time. Just because it happened to you doesn't mean you should go around telling everybody else not to do it. And I'm thinking, I'm not. I'm not going around telling everybody else not to do it. You're missing the point. The point is, these stories are not as rare as you think they are. And these stories need to be acknowledged, and something needs to be happening as far as finding a solution, whether that is reducing the vaccine schedule, changing some of the ingredients and formulations so that we can make it as safe as possible. Like we always say, how many anecdotes is it before it becomes data? I did see a lot of people acknowledging that my story and Serenity's story is valid on why we would not want to continue. But then the other big thing that they tried to throw in there is that's exactly why now I should be thankful for everybody else vaccinating, because I'm actually relying, or my daughter's relying on their herd immunity. This was a big argument that was also brought up in the Dr. Mike video, which we'll talk in a second.
Right.
But so I want to talk about that part. This idea that if your child has been hurt by vaccines, or you have been hurt by vaccines as an adult, that you should be even more excited to support people vaccinating because you now depend on their herd immunity. Okay, so what, you give me your thoughts on that, and then I'll give you my thoughts on that.
Right, exactly, and we'll hear about that from Dr. Mike as well. Yeah, it's that shocked me, and I think the reason behind that is again the pro mandate side, and even the the generally pro vaccine side. They actually really think that anyone who speaks out against vaccines in any way or shares anything about their story of vaccine injury, they actually think you are out to abolish vaccines, and you're not. You simply do not want to give your child any vaccines anymore, and you don't want your child's rights to be an equal citizen to be taken away for that. You want the right to go to school, the right to appear in public,
rights to be taken
and other
away.
children's rights. But I imagine, I don't have a vaccine injured child, but I hear from other parents the one thing and one thing only that is important to them. No, it's not one thing, but the reason why they're out there talking about this is they simply want other parents to know that there is a risk, that this could happen to your child too. No one else is going to tell you the risk.
And it's real.
Right. The risk is real. And the three people on the pro-vaccine side on the middle ground, they're not going to warn their parents, their patients, that these things can happen. So that's up to parents who vaccine reactions happen to. It's up to them to share their stories.
Well, did you notice how Marissa on the pro side said to you when you talked about 1 in 3,000 risk? She says, but that instills fear. I'm sorry if that instills fear. That's the fact. You know what I'm saying? Those are facts. It doesn't matter if that instills fear. We cannot not tell the truth because we're afraid people will be afraid. So she's essentially saying, well, if you tell people 1 in 3,000, that's going to instill fear. I'm sorry, but that's the truth.
Right. 1 in 3,000 of having a seizure after the MMR vaccine.
Right. Which is 1 in 1,250 if it's MMR vaccine plus varicella together.
Right.
So when they're talking about that 1 in a million number, which I hate that phrase because it's just so inaccurate.
Right.
Really
and see, and that doctor, the intensive care unit doctor, I mean, he sounds like a great doctor. He sounds very knowledgeable. I would say, though, every single one of the points he made about vaccines was a media soundbite.
100%.
I could tell he has done little to no research about actual vaccines. And the way we know that is he truly believes that severe vaccine reactions are 1 in a million.
And that's the only kind of reaction people have.
And that's why he made that claim. And they kind of showed this in the video. We sort of jumped all over that. When he said 1 in a million, I think all three of us were like, wait.
He even said 1 in 2 million.
Right.
He said 1 in 1 million or 1 in 2 million.
Yeah, I forget. So I kind of went on for a little while about how that totally negates the high probability reactions. 1 in a million is only anaphylactic shock. Yet he states it as if it applies to all vaccines, because that's the media soundbite he's heard. If he had actually studied it, he would never have said that, because he would have known other reactions are way more.
Do you remember what else he said? He also said 80,000 people died from the flu last year. That was not on there.
You're right.
But he said
that's
that.
A media soundbite.
It is. Anybody who has done any research could not possibly believe those numbers because they are so exacerbated from the truth. And so that did also, as soon as he said that, I was like, okay, this guy really hasn't done any research either. When I was there, that's what I was thinking to myself.
And the other doctor, I believe, doesn't have children yet.
He doesn't have kids yet. He's new.
Right. And so he hasn't even looked into this anyway. So again, we're talking with two doctors who are just general doctors. They have general knowledge about vaccines, but really every single point they made without fail were either sort of their own personal story or a media soundbite.
But didn't you notice what was funny
and I don't think so. I don't think they were trying to be media savvy. I actually think that's all they knew.
100%. They actually believe it. Like
Right.
this has
Right.
actually gone into their consciousness as they're part of their belief system,
Right.
and they're just rehashing those facts the way most people do.
Right.
But I was going to say what I find so interesting about the personal story the older doctor shared is that that story had nothing to do with vaccines. He was telling the story about his daughter who has these illnesses and how he trusted his physician to put her on a chemotherapy drug in low doses to help her arthritis. And, he welled up in the process, which felt very forced to me, I'll be honest. I did feel like he was forcing the need to become emotional.
But when you share something personal about your own child, it's hard to not. I don't know.
I was standing right next to him. I'm just saying it felt, there was a comment on the video that said he deserved an Oscar for his performance. But I'm just saying, I felt like maybe they had encouraged him to make sure and tell a story that's personal. It's okay to be emotional. And I felt like he kind of was, because it had nothing to do with what we were talking about, really. I mean, outside of trusting your physician, I just felt like it was irrelevant to the vaccine conversation. It was not a story that had to do with somebody getting an infectious disease that they were not vaccinated for and they had this harm.
Right.
And it was not a story of somebody getting a vaccine and having harm. It really didn't fall into either of those categories. So he was sharing a personal story, but the personal story to me didn't necessarily apply to what our conversation was.
Yeah, but that's sort of the strategy in that kind of context is to share a personal story that gets people to like you.
Yes.
Then they're going to like other things you say.
I think
and trust other things you say.
100%.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
Yeah, and I would say, people who are really anti-vaccine, who really kind of want to do away with vaccines, they're probably very unhappy with a couple comments on how I would say, well, yeah, getting the measles vaccine or getting the chickenpox vaccine that will prevent, that will help prevent the spread of the disease. It's not perfect. It's not going to, always work. But see, what then they didn't show me saying is we know that the whooping cough and the tetanus and diphtheria and pertussis vaccines, we know those don't prevent the spread of disease. And hepatitis B is not a disease that children spread around. So, and even though there are maybe some circumstances where a vaccine will help prevent the spread, there are many more circumstances where a vaccine will not prevent the spread. And then that's where in the video they start talking about micro. Well, if you're going to go micro on this, you can pick and choose different vaccines. And we felt, you should go micro when you're looking at vaccines. The other side was, well, no, you kind of, it should all be sort of, macro as kind of, one big decision. And so that was sort of part of that. And I kind of wish they had included, if I'm going to say something about measles and chickenpox vaccine, they ought to have put, the point I made that how other vaccines don't prevent the spread. So why are you guys trying to mandate them, or why think they should be mandatory for everyone? So that's kind of one point.
I would love to see the rest of that footage.
Yeah, and I'll tell you the was interesting. I guess I'll talk a little bit. I mean, this was up in the Los Angeles area. You and I kind of drove up there together, and you sort of drove into this pretty sketchy neighborhood, and we were. I remember driving up, and there were kind of people that looked like they could be homeless, kind of walking around on the streets. And
I'm not worried about the homeless people. I was worried about the people like doing drugs in the street because
right.
that was literally happening.
Right. And so we had to find a place to park. We weren't sure. The place wasn't very well labeled. It was almost like this chain link fence opening, sort of sliding fence thing that we had to go through. And we're just kind of looking around and like, where is this place? It was
a nondescript warehouse.
Yes.
It was like one of those kind of circumstances because, and then, they're decreasing their overhead costs. They shot a couple other episodes that.
Right. And you know what? Not to rag on. I mean, that kind of, I kind of liked the ambiance of the place once we were inside. It was kind of interesting to be there instead of going to some flashy, Hollywood studio. It was kind of made it feel a little bit more down to earth, I would say. I kind of thought it was interesting how they kind of kept us mostly separate, the two groups, the
beginning. Yeah, at the beginning they had their own room, we had our own section.
And then, but yeah, it was interesting. It was this big warehouse, and we kind of got all mic'd up, and they had us, stand away from the chairs. They would ask us a question, how do you feel about something? And then we would come sit down and share our concerns. And
I had somebody ask me about this. You could sit anywhere. There were no sides on a particular prompt.
Exactly.
So it wasn't like, oh, if you agree with this, you're on the right side or on the left side. I know that's confusing. We were on our sides while we were standing. But anytime we came to sit, they said, just sit wherever you want.
Right. And I even explained, like you said earlier, we're labeled the anti-vaccine side for lack of any other thing. But I actually made a very important point to say that, and I didn't even say I'm not anti-vaccine or I'm not pro-vaccine. I think I didn't even say that. I just said the main reason I'm here today is that I am anti-vaccine mandates. I'm anti, any sort of medical mandates, and I'm pro-informed consent.
That wasn't in the video.
No, it wasn't in the video, and I'm pro-informed consent. I think they was in the video,
yeah.
But you know what? For me, I'll tell you what I was a little scared about is they would ask us these questions, and we had to decide if we're essentially going to agree with that question, which sort of makes us a little more pro-vaccine, if we agreed with it, or if we disagree with the question or the topic, which kind of makes us more anti-vaccine. There's very little that was kind of neutral, I would say. There was some. As far as the questions. Yeah, as far as the question. They asked one question, which they left out of the footage, which I felt was very interesting.
I feel like there were a lot of questions they left out.
You're right. They left out a lot of questions. But the one question I was kind of worried about was they asked the question was, vaccines have helped more people than they have harmed. Or vaccines have saved more lives than they have harmed. Mm-hmm. That was the question. And the three pro-vaccine people walked out for that, and they agreed, that more vaccines have helped more people than they've harmed. You walked out on that as well. You kind of agreed with that statement in general, with some some additional things to say about it. I stayed back as if I did not agree with that question. Which was kind of a bit of a risk, I felt. It's taking a risk and taking a chance that I'm now portraying myself as now thinking. Now I'm saying vaccines now cause more harm than good is essentially what I'd be saying by not stepping out for that. And I'm kind of glad they didn't show that question because I don't think they would have portrayed my response correctly. Right. My response essentially was... as you guys talked, if you look at all the history and how we've gotten rid of some very serious, severe infectious diseases, and maybe vaccines have done a lot of good over the century, my approach to that was basically looking at now, forgetting the history, given the current status of how we give 69 doses of vaccines to every single child. If we compared the severe reactions to vaccines compared to the numbers of severe cases we're preventing by this huge vaccination schedule, I don't know that you can say we are now saving more people than would be harmed by the disease. And you're still
talking about U.S.
I'm talking about only
industrialized
U.S.
nations.
Only United States. You're right, because you guys talked about...
I step forward because as a global...
Right, globally.
A global issue. And again, you know how my stance is on... I just did a recent post about this. The unintended consequence of losing natural immunity. When you step back and you look as a population as a whole, I wonder now what kind of situation we've gotten ourselves in. Because yes, we've decreased the incidence of disease for particular diseases through certain vaccines. Other diseases have decreased on their own. And we're in a situation now where we are dependent on vaccines now because mothers don't have the natural immunity to pass. We're shifting that burden of disease to infants and adults.
Did you or I talk about that? I think I don't remember if one of us talked about that.
I don't remember that.
But
I mean, that's a valid point, is that it's not to say vaccines don't, like you in the video said vaccines, I'm not going to say vaccines don't work. They do reduce the case. And what you are talking about are specific diseases. They reduce the number of cases. Like the measles vaccine will reduce the number of measles cases. But it's not necessarily reducing measles mortality for the disease as it existed before, because it was just as benign before as it is now if you do happen to catch it. But also, what happens now that we have lost this natural immunity? Right. Are we actually more healthy as a result of mass vaccination for a disease like that?
Right, exactly. And I feel like we don't have...
Which we should do an episode on.
And I feel like we don't have the data to say now vaccines help more people than they harm. Because honestly, if a vaccine is doing some sort of harm to people, and it's actually harming the immune system of every single person that gets a vaccine, then that's a lot of harm being done simply to save a very, small number of serious cases of that disease.
And again, we're talking U.S. industrialized nations.
Yeah. So that's kind of why I took that stance on that question. And then after the show, I was like, oh no, what are they going to show? And interestingly, they almost painted me as being pro-vaccine in this video. I
personally feel,
I don't know. They really did not. I can definitely say, for those of you who are very, very anti-vaccine and now hate me for how I was portrayed in that video.
You can't win them all.
I know.
I mean, honestly, that's what I've learned.
I know. I mean, I knew it was a risk to be on an edited video. I felt they would be fair, and I felt they were pretty fair. I felt that they came up with kind of what I expected them to come up with. I kind of wish they could have maybe showed another one or two of my primary points I would have wanted to make about things in a kind of, in an even way that described the risk of vaccination. And they didn't. But
my feeling
it's
is
better than I think what most stations would have put on, because no one else is doing this.
But I feel like they didn't on purpose. And I messaged you about this because I feel like because they had two doctors, they did focus on me a lot, which I was surprised by that. And I think as a result, they did make it look like doctors versus moms. And if you would have had too much to say, then it would have been doctors versus doctors. And then that makes it an even playing field. And so I think on some level, it was designed a little bit to be sloped. And so that could be one of the reasons why you were not shown. I mean, I really think it would have been nice to have another doctor on our side as well, representing our side, because that way you would have seen another medical doctor or another professional giving that, because they had two. It only seems like it would be fair. Yeah. But then let's talk about this Dr. Mike video. So I don't know this guy, but somebody sent it to me yesterday, and he has some kind of YouTube following. I don't follow these YouTube channels.
He has like 3 million followers, I think, and about 700,000 had already watched the video that you showed me.
So he did a video of him watching live our video of Middle Ground, and I honestly, I didn't know what to think. I was expecting it to be pretty bad because, some of these like bloggers or vloggers, whatever they're called, what's his name? Z-Dog. Is that his name?
Right, yeah.
Some of these people actually have a following because they're so ruthless, or because they're so cruel, or because they're so disrespectful and confrontational. So sometimes that literally is their following. Like that's what, so they are that persona because that's what their following expects from them. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know what to expect, but I have to say, I feel like the guy was fair. I feel like he, for his side, again, he doesn't have kids. So I just want to point that out. He is a young doctor without children who was watching our video. And what he said so many times was, well, this doctor doesn't seem anti-vaccine. He said that twice about you.
Right.
And at the
end,
he agreed
people should get informed consent.
And if you go to the end, you'll hear him say, I'm skeptical about this because these people were actually reasonable and logical. And what he's saying is he thinks most people that, are questioning vaccine safety or quote unquote anti-vaccine are extremists. And he quoted a couple people that have messaged him saying he's killing babies and whatever. I'm not an extremist. I don't personally see any benefit to extremism, and I have been criticized for not being extreme enough, as I'm sure you have too.
Right.
There's always somebody who is not going to be happy with your message. It's not enough. It's not this. It's not that. I don't believe in telling anybody what to do, and so
it's Dr. Mike is his show.
Yeah, and
Dr. Mike,
and he watches our whole thing. He makes his points. He disagreed with me on the fact that he thinks parents shouldn't know more about shouldn't be because they're so close to their child.
No, I was floored that he actually felt like doctors would know more about the health of your child than a parent would.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, what doctor actually thinks that? Doctors without children.
Doctors without children.
That.
Yes, and he is one of them. And so was one of the doctors that was on this episode. I think it's, honestly, I'm going to post something about this. I really don't think if you don't have children and you have not personally read vaccine safety research, I do not think you get a vote. I don't think you get to weigh in on this debate, because you cannot weigh in on this debate as somebody without children who has not looked at vaccine safety research. I'm sorry, but like all of the people commenting are all these young, like 19, 20-year-olds who don't have kids either. And they're like, what's wrong with these people? You want polio to come back? It's like these people don't have a good grasp or understanding on this topic because they haven't had to, and they believe the same things they've been told like everybody else has been told. And I just don't think these people should get to weigh in on whether or not legislative bills and mandates should be supported and whether or not vaccine injury happens. Like if you don't have kids, I'm going to say this again because I'm going to post about this. If you don't have kids and you have not done vaccine research personally, I do not personally think that you should get a vote and you should not be able to weigh in on this. This is my opinion is I don't think it is fair for you to get to have a say in whether or not my kid should keep vaccinating after a reaction or whether or not she gets the right to go to school or any of that stuff. Any of it, period. Boom, boom, boom. End of it.
But Melissa,
boom.
Tell us how you really feel though. I'm not
Here's how I really feel.
Yes.
No, because you know what? As I was reading all these comments, I'm like, oh my God, these people don't even have kids. Once it happened, and I got into another Facebook back and forth comment thing on my own personal or on a friend's personal page with somebody who was saying, please don't come at me with the emotional argument. I'm like, oh, wait, because I'm a woman, this argument becomes emotional. That was bad. And this guy doesn't have kids.
Yeah.
Like you can't tell. And I said, what would you do if your kid had a seizure? His response was, I'd feel really bad about it, but the greater good is better than the individual.
Yeah, that sounds like someone else 25 years ago, right?
Well,
Me.
I mean, yeah okay, but
Yeah.
but I'm telling you, if your kid has a seizure, there's no freaking way that you are going to say, I'm sorry, little Bobby. We're going to keep on schedule because the greater good is better than the individual.
You're absolutely right. If my kid had a bad reaction, you're right.
No
it would have
way.
been a different story.
It would have been.
But it started out the other way.
Sure.
Right.
Until your kid has the reaction.
Right.
So that's what all parents whose kids have had reactions, we all say the same thing. We all thought we were all pro-vaxxers and pro-mandate before it happens to you. And now some of these people call themselves ex-vaxxers because it's all good until it happens to you.
Right. And Dr. Mike says in his his video of this video, he disagrees. He thinks everyone whose kids have bad reactions, they should not become activists. They should not speak out.
Right, because you should be supporting this. This is what we didn't talk
you're
about.
Right. Yeah,
this is
right.
what he was mentioning is because you should be reliant on herd immunity. I want to talk about that's what I was asking you to.
You should want everybody to.
I asked you to comment on that, and you didn't.
Oh, I thought you did.
Specifically herd immunity. This idea that my daughter is now protected by everybody else. So I'll say mine first since you didn't respond. Okay, listen. We've talked about herd immunity in another episode. Natural immunity versus artificially induced vaccine immunity. Because we know vaccines wane, every single vaccine has a waning point. Because we know that, and some of them are very short, my daughter is not really being protected by the 95% herd that they think exists because the 95% herd doesn't exist. So when the childhood vaccination rate is 95%, that still is only a portion of the population. My daughter is still going to be in contact with all of the adults who no longer have sufficient antibody response for a particular infection or disease. So she's not protected by herd immunity because herd immunity for our population does not exist the way these people think it exists.
Right.
So what they said to me is I should be on my knees thankful for all these people who are vaccinated because they're really protecting her. But all I could think of is what about all the adults who are no longer protected against these particular diseases? They're no longer protecting her, and therefore this bubble of protection doesn't exist the same way they think it does. It used to exist when we had natural immunity because so much of the population would have been exposed. But again, we don't see these diseases running rampant even without that protection. So I think that argument of herd immunity is protecting the vaccine injured, I think really needs to be broken down.
Right. I almost wonder if they're trying to actually be savvy about it, like they're trying to negate you as a group.
Yes.
They're trying to bring you as a group onto their side in the public's eye.
See, we're really helping you.
Yeah, and it's not that it's not that Dr. Mike knows he's going to convince you to switch sides. He wants the public to see that your side is really on his side.
Well, do you know what he said at the end? He's like, really, he goes, you're not going to get through to people if you give them data and statistics. He said, you're only going to get through to them to help change their mind if you give them personal stories and you talk about it from a personal standpoint. So he was actually applauding the fact that the show did it that way. Mm-hmm. He was applauding the fact that the other doctors shared these personal stories. He's like, that's how you do it. That's how you get through to people and convince them to believe what you're believing. So you're right. He doesn't think you're going to change my mind, but he's thinking all the other people watching might be on the fence. And those are the people we have to convince. But you're absolutely right, because I think they're deflecting from the fact that there is vaccine injury in the first place. They're deflecting to that to, hey, don't feel bad. We're here to support you with herd immunity.
They're using vaccine-injured children as a reason everybody should vaccinate more.
Instead of
it's almost like a pro-vaccine argument.
Instead of actually saying, oh my God, but guess what? There are vaccine-injured children, and oh shoot, shouldn't we do something about that? How about we address that fact that there are these children? These children are being harmed. Okay, so instead he just kind of hopes you won't notice this by just let's jump to herd immunity. And I thought that, and so anyway, overall, I thought he was much better than I expected him to be. And he really gave us a lot of bonus points for what we brought to the table. So I think in the end, he wasn't as against us as he thought he would be, maybe originally. But I saw they were talking about the measles on The View.
Oh gosh, The View.
Did you see that?
That was okay. Let's save that. Let's save that
God. It was so it's such a short piece that they had, but it was so bad.
Every single media soundbite. Every single one of them.
But much misinformation. They said every state has religious exemptions, which they had to counter. Somebody in the mic in the earpiece had to give them that update later. They didn't know which ones didn't have it, but they said everybody's got religious exemptions. But then right away, I'm looking at Joy, and she's got this paper in front of her that she's reading off of.
She's reading off of a teleprompter also.
And she's reading the teleprompter, but she also has the paper of the points she has to hit. Out of nowhere, she says, vaccines don't cause autism.
Right.
Out of nowhere.
Right. Well, it was every classic media argument.
But nobody even said autism. Right. And she literally had to get that in there out of nowhere. And I was like, oh my God, this is textbook 101. Media sound bites for vaccination. And she was reading them off, all the checklist of things she had to get out there. And it was everything we talk about. But I just thought that was shocking. It wasn't even like a parent or somebody said, oh, they're concerned about the MMR vaccine because they're afraid it there was no segue.
I know.
No transition.
I know, but here's the thing. I can 100% guarantee you, if you are having a private conversation with each one of those women, they would not have that viewpoint so strongly.
I agree.
It is for the media. It's so they can keep their jobs. It's so they have a media agenda to pass. I bet if you got each one of those in a one-on-one conversation behind closed doors, and you talk about vaccine risk, you talk about the lack of safety research,
and your own story, what's happening to your own kids,
they would be like. I know. There is that side of it.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Or other people have told me that, but I can't talk about that on the air.
Oh, totally.
There's no way.
And the timing? Come on. Yes. The timing? 40 cases, and it's enough to be on The View.
Yeah.
But last year, 300 and some cases, it wasn't on The View.
Yeah.
So it's on The View. Why is it on The View right now?
Yeah. Because
the same thing we're going to talk about.
Pass laws,
It's all about the timing.
Well, let's wrap this one up so we can do another one, so we can be on time for calling what's her name, Dawn.
He's always rushing me.
I know. It's like you just keep talking and talking and talking.
But this is all this stuff is important, and some of the stuff bleeds over into other topics. It's okay. We can repeat them again later. Don't be afraid.
I know.
But anyway, if you want to watch The Middle Ground, go to YouTube. Just Google search Middle Ground. You'll see it's the most recent episode. I've not posted it on my own page. We haven't posted it on a Immunity Education Group. You haven't shared it yet.
I haven't seen anybody kind of in our
it's only been out a couple days. It's been like 4 days
about it, but someone will, I'm sure.
It's almost 1 million views, and it's been like 4 days.
Yeah, so remember, the absolute number one thing to post when you hear people start bashing us, for not representing the anti-vaccine side enough. We did. We said so many things, everything you would have wanted said virtually. We said it in a way that we felt would be palatable and acceptable. They just whittled it all down. They just didn't show almost everything.
Yeah, it's a very
so
short
keep that
segment.
in mind as you watch it, and maybe we'll see the whole thing someday.
And also, please like it, because you know what? This conversation isn't happening, like you said, and I applaud this production company for allowing this controversial topic. So many comments said, this should not even be on this show because there are not two sides to this debate. Everybody, all these like, again, a vocal minority was saying, Jubilee, I'm upset at you for even having this on here. This is making it seem like there is another side. And they really believe there is only one side to this. But again, that's how they labeled us, because the question was, should you vaccinate your kids? So they're assuming every one of us said, we think every single person in this world shouldn't. And that's never been, my platform. I know it's not yours, but I still applaud the company for putting it out there. I'm sure they're taking a little bit of heat for this.
Right.
Many people commented that, oh my God, you're giving them a platform to make it seem like they have logic and good viewpoints. And a lot of people did say there were good viewpoints. And so that's what's kind of, I think, is good. And, at the last time I checked, it was like 31,000 likes and 1,500 dislikes. So I encourage people, when you watch it, give a like. That's a support to this production company, that it's important to be open to this conversation and to understand there are two sides to this. Again, most of the comments I see are very aggressive extremists, saying things like, your children should die, you should die. I mean, it's like very extreme and very violent in some cases. That does not represent the viewpoint of the majority of America.
Right.
And so I think as shown by the likes, look how many likes that there are. So enough people found value to the conversation. Yes, we didn't get all the stuff we wanted to say, but I'm still happy
that they even did it. Yes.
And then now it's been taken. Other people are, taking the video and doing their view on it. And that's still allowing the conversation to continue, which is all we're trying to do. Let the conversation continue. And so give them a little support, I'd say, by going to, you watch it, go give them support. I probably will post about it soon, and we'll maybe post about it on IEG, so that people have access to it. But just search it, and it's called The Middle Ground. And I would love to see what you think about it. Message us when we share it on IEG, comment on there. I'd love to see what your thoughts are on the entire show and how it was portrayed and all that. And they definitely need a part 2 or a part 3 on this series, because this is such a complicated topic.
Yes.
Okay, I'm done. Jeez.
Okay. Well, we'll see you guys next time for on the vaccine conversation.
We're gonna be the peace we wanna see in the world. Yeah, be the peace we wanna see in the world. Be the love we wanna see in the world. Be the joy we wanna see in the world. Be the change we wanna see in the world.
The information in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice. Always consult your healthcare professional for information on vaccines and infectious diseases.